In 1984, Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street brings murderous dreams to screens. The first movie ever produced by New Line Cinema, since then with the nickname The Company That Freddy Built, has a similar theme as Dream Escape, released 3 months earlier by Paramount, which rejected the Nightmare script because of these similarities with their current production, in which a telepathically gifted, who has only used his abilities for his own benefits, helps now patients in a sleep clinic with their recurring nightmares. At first with a machine, but later he is able to enter their dreams on his own. Since the US president is being treated there for nuclear nightmares and therefore wants to disarm to the displeasure of the Secret Service, they have infiltrated the project with a psychopath, use it as weapon and be able to kill anyone in his sleep without a trace. Joseph Rubin's undeservedly flopped, very well cast science fiction horror insider tip not only shows some concepts for later mega hits like Matrix or Inception, The Dream Entry Machine, also anticipates many elements from Nightmare, like the theory that a dreamed death you could also replace Dream with Matrix, results in real-life death. Or a killer who can turn in a dream into anything and use every weapon imaginable. But also the telepath and story elements from Nightmare 3 Dream Warriors, whose later director Chuck Russell, what a twist, also co-wrote the Dreamscape script. And even the Nightmare 4 movie title, The Dream Master, comes from Dreamscape's uncredited original from the 60s by Roger Zelazny. The production company used his script at the time, which was set among others in the future, and changed just enough not to have to credit him. After a friend predicts her own death by a disfigured man with a knife glove from her dreams, Nancy doubts the guilt of the boyfriend, who is imprisoned for the murder by her father, the sheriff. She falls asleep during class and meets the real killer, but manages to escape. Also realizes that he is apparently showing up in the dreams of most of the Elm Street teens. As more friends die and parents seemingly don't want to see any connection, she finds out that the burnt man with the hat and the striped sweater from her nightmares is named Fred Krueger, who was lynched years ago as a child murderer by an angry Elm Street mob and is now taking revenge on their children in their dreams. The iconic soundtrack by Charles Bernstein, Cujo, Deadly Friend, was a major contributor to the success and, much like the film, is the best in the series. The counting rhyme sung by the jump rope playing kids in the Nightmare movies is based on an old nursery rhyme. Part 2 by Christopher Young, Hellraiser, The Fly 2, The Dark Half, has a completely original score. In the sequels, from time to time, a variation of the original main theme from Part 1 can be spotted in addition to the own score. Nightmare is Wes Craven's masterpiece. The around $1 million US production with an R rating was a surprise success. Got quite rightly mostly positive reviews, made worldwide more than 50 times its budget back, and created with Freddy Krueger, similar to Halloween or Friday the 13th, a new horror icon but also its own subgenre. It achieves suspense primarily through the eerie atmosphere, excellent practical effects that still hold up, and a mysterious antagonist who is rarely seen. Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 1994 is not a sequel. It treats the series as normal movies, 6 to date, with Freddy's Final as the official conclusion. And many of those involved practically play themselves, who now have to deal with the real Freddy. Wes Craven is making a new Nightmare movie, again with Robert Englund, but things go wrong during the production. Meanwhile, Heather Langenkamp, Nancy from parts 1 and 3, experiences phone terror, and her little son Dylan, Cage from Pet Sematary, keeps having nightmares about Fred Krueger, even though he doesn't even know the movies. Slowly those involved realize that their fantasy character tries to enter the real world. Wes Craven's Enter the Metaverse, disappointing in my view, had the lowest box office of the entire series, and made, despite positive reviews, not even 20 million of the $8 million budget worldwide back, making it a flop. At the time, I thought the basic idea itself, an earlier rejected draft from Nightmare 3, sounds interesting, and also seeing people usually invisible behind a production, like Wes Craven or producer Robert Shea. But the realization itself, illogical. There are no rules for Freddy. He's there because that's just the way it is, and is defeated for reasons. Annoying, especially the constantly screaming child. Confusing, why the hell is John Saxon the only one to revert back to his role as Nancy's father? And just straight up boring, despite lots of references to the original. Freddy is supposed to be some kind of demon whatever. His design with coat and leather pants is not really convincing. The new makeup looks way too artificial, and I don't even want to start with the horrible CGI. In 2010, a remake appeared with a completely new cast by Michael Bay's infamous franchise wrecking company Platinum Dunes. Not the only classic they cashed on with a new/shit version. Just like the unimaginative hacks, of course, reinterpretators from Blumhouse. So the story is quite similar, also serious as the original. Nancy and friends are plagued by nightmares and haunted by the boogeyman. Only that this Freddy is not a child murderer as before, but explicitly a child molester. Who the fuck had this brilliant idea? There's a good reason why this was completely cut out of the first Nightmare and also avoided like the plague in the sequels, with which, by the way, smartasses are defending this abomination. Yes, that was already planned in the original, in which now also the knife glove, actually his murder weapon at that time, now only there because script no longer makes sense.
I can't get no sleep.
And that no character gets any development, is completely interchangeable, and you don't give a fuck about them is no help either. Especially true for the new Nancy, where even with a second viewing I constantly forgot who the hell she's supposed to be. What a miscast. Many scenes here are simply imitated in worse.
I can't get no sleep.
The false trail that Freddy is perhaps innocent comes after an hour out of nowhere. Also makes with that what we have already seen, what he says,
"You're my little
and his constant, clearly sexual, suggestive behavior no sense at all, and dissolves after 15 minutes, with photos in a quickly found room which for years was conveniently overlooked by everyone into nothing. During a micro nap on Elm Street, there is never any real tension. But some scenes, especially with rewatching, thanks to the knowledge that these are his abuse victims, are simply unpleasant to sit through, especially towards the end when he tries to be funny. But the real nightmares come primarily through the horrible CGI, as usual. A nightmare for Freddy fans, Samuel Bayer's first and who would have thought that only movie was able to more than triple its $35 million budget worldwide, but received rightly negative feedback from all sides. It is the prime example of an unnecessary remake, often in serious reviews only briefly mentioned or skipped entirely, and is considered, at least among those who have not yet completely brain-rot, the absolute low point of the nightmare movies, but more on those in Cub vs. Freddy.